Hey everybody, I'm here to tell you about the last 3 books that I read in 2019. So it's a read and review wrap up of 2019. It's a little late, I know it is, but I'll explain in a minute. Talk to you soon. Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog. How are you doing today? I hope you guys are doing very, very well. It is time for me to tell you about the last 3 books that I read at the end of 2019. Now, it's a little bit late, but if you guys have watched a few videos ago, I explained to you, I've been out of the loop. We had, my grandma passed away and I was sort of taken out of the YouTube life for a couple of weeks. So I'm back. I'm gonna try to finish up a bunch of videos, and this is one of them that's coming to you better late than never. I have 3 more books to tell you about that I read at the end of 2019, and all of them are very, very good. So get out your pen, get out your paper, get out your Goodreads, because I think all of these will wind up on your TBR if they aren't already. As always, if you can order these from your local independent bookstore, I ask that you do, or not, ask your library to get them if that's how you get your books so that you can read them along. So let's get started with The Story of a Goat by Perumal. This is translated from the Tamil by N. Kalan Raman. And I apologize for all of the butchering of those names that I just did. This is out from Black Cat Books in the United States. Now, Mr. Muugan is a pretty prolific Indian writer from what I have been able to ascertain. He had a book that came out last year called One Part Woman that was rather successful. And this is actually a fun little book. It's very, very different than anything I read in 2019. Now, The Story of a Goat is the literally that, the story of a goat. We meet a couple, an older couple that lives in a rural part of India that has very little water. The husband is walking home one day when he walks into or runs into sort of this mythical giant of a man who has a tiny baby goat that he is holding. And the man winds up giving the goat to this older man, saying, "You need to take care of it," and sort of walks away. There's no explanation where the goat comes from, who his parents are, who her parents are, or any of that. And what winds up happening is we get a sort of a dual narrative. One, we get the perspective of this older couple living in this really tough environment where at times there's no water, no rain, crops disappear, but they have become used to it. They've learned how to live on the land. And it talks about their dealing with not only crops, but also livestock and a lot to do with goats. We also learn about their family. They travel to visit their daughter a couple of times, who is pretty far away. I think it's a 4-day walk. We also learn a little bit about the government and how the government maintains sort of control of the livestock. What is the sort of the process that has to go through? And then we get the perspective of the goat. She grows up. She learns who she is. She becomes sort of a teenager, becomes ornery. Also, she struggles with her health and so on and so forth, but then she also falls in love and wants to mate and have children and all of that kind of stuff. So it's sort of this dual fun narrative. While the goat story and the couple story sort of run in parallel, we learn a little bit about the world in which they are in, which is this rural part of India that really is dealing with this drought. Interestingly enough, I just attended a book club meeting that my friend Ryan puts on, and there was a young couple from India there at the book club, and the gentleman, who I apologize, I can't remember his full name, was from the town or this area that this book occurs in, and he says still that there is major water issues in that part of India and that there isn't a lot being done with it. So I thought that was really a powerful thing to learn about this story. I loved it. It's sort of like a fable at times. It's got a sort of this mythical aspect to it, but at times it's very real and very strong and very just powerfully told. I really liked it. I went into it not knowing what to expect, and it's a book that I would recommend to a lot of people. So that's The Story of a Goat by Perumal, out from Black Cat here in the United States. I think all the covers are pretty exciting that I've looked at on Goodreads. So I actually love this cover. I love myself a goat face, so I'm super excited. Next book is a book that was recommended to me by Shelf by Shelf on Instagram. But if you don't follow him, you absolutely should. He is fantastic. He has such great book tastes, and also he is hilarious in his Instagram stories. Cracks me up all the time. I absolutely adore him. But he put on my radar The Logger Queen of Minnesota by J. Ryan Stradal. This is out from Pamela Dorman Books, which is an imprint over at Viking. Now, I had read the first book by this author, which was Kitchens of the Great Midwest, which is sort of like one of those interconnected short story books. I read it a couple of years ago, but I remember really enjoying it. And I remember just really sort of the heartwarmingness of it, and it had a lot to do with food, so I was really into it for that. But when this was discussed for me, it was like I was looking for something to sort of warm my heart. And I wanted just a book that I sort of could fall in love with the characters, and that absolutely happens. This is the story really of three women, two sisters who have a falling out over the family farm. So they both are raised on a farm, and when their parents die, the farm goes to the younger sister. Now that really puts the older sister in some very hard financial times. But the younger sister has this immense dream of opening and producing beer. And she goes to college and she gets a degree and she learns how to produce beer. And she becomes rather famous for her beer, and she does very well. The older sister marries a man, has her children, has a granddaughter who winds up living with her after her daughter and son-in-law are killed in a car crash, I believe. And it is a lot about the dynamic between the grandmother and the granddaughter. But the granddaughter also has her own narrative. Where does she want to go in life? What does she want to do? And as you can imagine, all of this revolves around the beer industry in Minnesota. It talks about the different dynamics as beer was changing from the big conglomerates to the IPAs. There's a lot of interesting stuff. I didn't know that I would care at all about beer, but I did. And I liked how the characters, these women, were really involved in how to make beer, how to create this, how it was its own sense of art, its own sense of art form. But it's also a lot about choices and family choices and the alienation that occurs between the two sisters after the farm is given straight away to the younger sister. It causes a rift, and a rift that needs to eventually, if anything's going to happen between these sisters, something's going to happen about what happened then. But what also we have a grandmother who loves her granddaughter very much and has to work until she is in her late 70s, just work in order to make sure the ends meet, because she didn't get the windfall from the farm and life didn't turn out the way that she wanted it to. So there's a lot of heartbreak in this book, but there's a lot of love, and it is absolutely brilliant. I just loved it. It is one of those books, you know, I have this sort of category where I say there are books that are a hug for the heart. This is that. This is a book. At the end of the book, I was teary-eyed with just the absolute love of a family, and also very interested in just where these people were going to go and what they were going to do. So that's The Logger Queen of Minnesota by J. Ryan Stradal, and this is out from Pamela Dorman Books, Viking. Last but not least is a book that really needs zero introduction from me, and that is Olive Again by Elizabeth Strout. Now, many people have read Olive Kitteridge, which was the original book that came out years ago, won the Pulitzer. It was phenomenal, and this was absolutely lovely. I missed Olive Kitteridge, I have to be honest with you. She is a cantankerous old woman, and I love everything about her. And what is really great about what Elizabeth Strout does here is she takes us to this tiny town, she introduces us to characters, she gives us these interconnected short stories, she makes us fall in love with people, get angry with people, hope for people, all within a few pages. Olive is, again, she's more prominent, I feel, in this book than she was in actually Olive Kitteridge. But I loved it. I loved it. And I think that if you've read both of them, you'll just sort of feel like they belong together. This isn't a book that feels forced as a sequel, but it gives you sort of a sense of what happened to the people from the original novel. And I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. So I highly recommend you read Olive Kitteridge and then Olive Again. I really think that if you like those interconnected short story books, that this will be one that will just really sit well with you. So that's Elizabeth Strout, Olive Again. This is out from Random House. Reads no real introduction, to be honest with you. This book is everywhere. I think this was Oprah's book, right? Wasn't this Oprah's latest book club pick? So yeah, she's gotten it out to there. But I also put my stamp of approval. So if Oprah wasn't enough, Russell Gray. There you go. I'm telling you to read it. So that is 3 books that I read to end 2019. All of them very different, but all of them very much worth your time. As always, if you are a return subscriber to my channel, thank you so very, very much. I really do appreciate it. If you are new to my channel, I hope you stick around. I hope you come to hear me talk more about books moving forward. As always, I encourage you to shop locally, read globally. Until next time, happy reading. Bye.